All right. Hello, hello, hello. My name's Andrea, or Drea for short. Today is Saturday, October 31st, 2020, and this is episode 6 of the Drea's Hook podcast. If you're joining me live here on Instagram, welcome. If you're catching the replay on IGTV, welcome. And if you're watching this on YouTube, welcome. So as always, we have a lot of things to talk about, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it. But first, I wanted to start off with some announcements. So obviously I am dressed up as a bee. Today is Halloween, so I wanted this episode to reflect that. Happy Halloween. I hope that if you're choosing to observe any festivities this evening, that you're staying safe. We're still in the middle of a pandemic and cases are on the rise, at least here in the United States. So please stay safe, whatever you choose to do today or tonight. Second of all, I wanted to announce that there might be a slight schedule change in the podcast coming up. So right now, I'm doing the podcast weekly, so every Saturday at 1 p.m. Central, y'all know the drill. But I'm finding it a little difficult to maintain that schedule right now. My day job has been a little busy, and I actually work a schedule where I get every other Friday off. And so on the weeks where I have that Friday off and have that long weekend, I really rely on that day to recharge. And the Saturday after that, I have a little bit more energy to do the podcast. But this week, for example, was a regular 5-day week, and I am just exhausted. And so I'm not really sure how sustainable it is for me to keep doing the podcast every week. So what I'm thinking is we will still have episode 7 of the podcast next week on November 7th. And then on the weeks in between the podcast, we'll have the Make With Me. So if you haven't seen it, a couple weeks ago, I was also feeling tired and not really able or willing to do the regular podcast. So I still got here on Instagram Live at 1 p.m. and I worked on one of my whips and we just talked and it was awesome and really chill. So I think that I can do that even if I'm feeling a little tired. So the plan is to do the podcast every other week and then have the Make With Me or like the Crochet With Me episodes in between. So definitely be sure you're watching my Instagram to stay updated on the schedule change, and if I need to change it again, I will go ahead and change it again because this is all kind of like one giant experiment and I'm learning things as I go and like seeing what my limits are. And I just want to make sure that I don't get burned out because I do really enjoy doing these, but I have to make sure that I'm able to do other things in my life as well. All right, so I'm seeing some love for the costume. Thank y'all so much. I don't know, like I was just watching something or reading something and saw a bee and I was like, that's what I want to be for Halloween. So I made it happen. You know, I didn't want a costume that was like too like cumbersome or fiddly. So this is where we're at. I tried to adjust the camera so that we could get the entire wings in the shot, but that wasn't really possible. And it's so funny, like walking around my apartment this morning and this afternoon, I have to actually like angle my body to be able to get through my doors. So they're pretty wide, but they're light and it's fun. And yeah, I really like this costume. I like bees. I've always kind of liked yellow and black together. So yeah, really excited that Halloween fell on a Saturday this year, but sad that, you know, because of the world situation, we can't really do too much, but we can still like celebrate at home and, you know, celebrate. All right. And then the last announcement that I wanted to make is, and this will be important for those of y'all who, you know, maybe like aren't able to like watch the podcast live and aren't able to stay the entire time, or who just watches them on IGTV. So usually, if you're not aware, once you go live on Instagram, it gives you an option to upload it to IGTV immediately and or save the video to your phone. So I do both. I upload the video to IGTV and I save it to my phone so that I can upload it to YouTube later. But apparently when you upload a live video straight to IGTV, it doesn't really give you good analytics. I'm not sure why. And so what I'm going to do is there's going to be a little bit of a delay for me uploading the video to IGTV. I'm gonna download the video to my phone and then upload it to IGTV from there. So hopefully I can get some better analytics, because I do look at the analytics and the statistics and everything to be able to make decisions about the podcast and see what's working and what's not working. So just be aware of that. It might be a couple of hours before the podcast is up on IGTV, but it probably will still be up on Saturday. And then YouTube will go up on Sunday because it takes forever to upload. Aw, how adorable. I love the wings, and bees are amazing. Thank you. I love bees as well. I think they're so cute. I've never been stung by a bee, and so there's a part of me that's like terrified that I'm allergic, but they don't mess with you if you don't mess with them. So that is what I'm going to stick to, and hopefully it works out. All right, so those are all the announcements I had. So now we're going to jump into our whips. All right, so the first whip I wanted to talk about is a pattern test that I'm working on. Let's see. This is the, wait, is this upside down? Okay, there we go. This is the Celine Cardigan by Leroo Crochet. Like I said, it's in testing right now, so it's probably not going to be released until like February. And the yarn I'm using is Knit Picks or We Crochet Swish DK, and I'm doing a 3-color fade. So the colors that I'm using are Cobblestone Heather, Marble Heather, and Dove Heather. So if we just hold these all up next to each other, this is the fade. I love gray, especially for cardigans. So since the cardigan is worked bottom up, I'm starting with the darkest gray, the Cobblestone Heather, and it's been a bit of a wild ride with this project. Not really. It's just apparently when I was first starting, I miscounted the stitches a little bit. I think I accidentally counted the turning chain as a stitch, even though the pattern notes specifically said that the turning chain doesn't count as a stitch. And so my stitch count was a little off. And I think this was Wednesday or Thursday evening. You know, I was just tired. I had had a pretty rough day at work, and I was just wanting to like crochet and like zone out. And so I wasn't really trying to deal with like counting stitches or like frogging or anything like that. So if you happen to see in my stories and on my IGTV, my fiance offered to frog for me to try to make things a little bit easier for me. And so there's now a video on my IGTV called Luke versus Frogging, and it's basically him trying to discuss or like imagine the sounds that frogging would make. And it's hilarious. It's very like silly, so if you're into that type of humor, you'd probably enjoy it. But yeah, that's kind of the origin story of that video. It was this project that he was frogging. That was hilarious. Yeah, it was pretty funny. Like, you can hear me laughing in the background. Like, he's so funny. He's so funny. So yeah, that's where that video came from. But now we are moving right along. I have a few more rows left to do before I'm able to introduce my second color of the fade. So I'm trying to get to the point where I can introduce the second color, and then I'm going to set it aside and work on some of my other projects. Since this is a pattern test, I wanted to make sure that I got started on it as soon as I could. It has a very generous deadline. It's not due until like late January, but I'm always like worried that like I'm gonna run out of yarn or like have to start over. I have good reason to be worried about those things. I've had both of those things happen to me in a pattern test before, so I really like to try to start as soon as possible to save myself some stress. But yeah, that is the Celine Cardigan. So the next project that I've been working on is the TL Yarn Crafts Holiday Tunisian Crochet Along, or TCAL. So we are currently on week 4 of 5 Week 5 starts on Monday, and that will be when the last 4 squares are posted. And then week 6 is all about the finishing, so the blocking and the seaming the squares together, adding the border, and I think that's it. So all of those like finishing techniques. So since I've been working on my cardigan mostly this week, I am running a little behind on the tea-cowl. I've only done 1 square from week 4 and started the second. So I'm definitely running a little bit behind, but it's okay. I knew this was going to happen. I intentionally let myself get behind so that I could work on the cardigan. And now I think I'm probably just going to have to catch up because I still want to finish it, or like at least be very close to finishing it by the time the tea-cowl ends, which I believe is November 15th. So anyway, once again, just briefly going to talk about the colors that I'm using. I'm using We Crochet or Knit Picks Brava Worsted. Color A is Mulberry. Color B is Caution. Color C is Cream. Color D is Silver. And then if we hold all 4 colors up together, this is what our palette is looking like. We're using the cream, we're using the cream and the silver more than we're using the caution and the mulberry. These two are acting more like accent colors. So yeah, I'm really excited about how everything's looking, and I'm so excited to get everything put together. Let's see. All right, so anyway, on to the squares that I've completed. So the first square I talked about in episode 5. I had barely started on it at that point, and now I've finished it. This is the arrowhead stitch. So yeah, I really like this one. It's, I know it looks kind of solid, but it's actually like a variation of a mesh stitch, and I'll actually show you the mesh stitch square a little later. And so it has some yarn overs in it, and that made it work up very quickly, which I was grateful for because the past couple of squares that I did before that were working up a little slow, so I was happy to have something that worked up quicker. And by the way, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to talk in detail about squares that I've already previously talked about. So if you're interested in squares that I've already completed, definitely be sure to check out episodes 4 and 5 because that's where I talk about those squares. So yeah, not too much more to say about this. I've said it before, but this yarn has really good stitch definition. So I really like the way that it came out. And you can kind of, am I holding this upside down? Yeah, I think I'm holding it upside down, y'all. Sorry about that. But now that it's facing the right way, you can kind of see why it's called that lighting though. You can kind of see why it's called the arrowhead stitch because it kind of has like these little peaks that look like arrowheads. So I really like this one. And then, so this was the last square from week 3. And then the first square from week 4 is also in this silver, and it's called the mesh stitch. You can definitely see it's a lot lighter and airier, has a lot of drape. Yeah, it just looks really nice. So like I said earlier, the arrowhead stitch is kind of a variation of the mesh stitch, but it's just a little bit more textured and like denser, a little bit thicker. So yeah, this one also worked up very quickly, probably even faster than the arrowhead stitch. So that was really exciting. So those are the 2 I actually have completed. And I do have one that I started, but I don't even know. I'll go ahead and show y'all, but it's literally just the first row. So this is the beginning of the bobble stitch square. As you can see, there are no bobbles on it because like I said, it's literally just the first row. For some reason, and it's probably just like me being tired and stuff, I was having a really hard time wrapping my head around the chart because she has the bobble like patterns laid out on a chart, and like my stitch count was just wrong, and I tried it like so many times and it just wasn't working for some reason. So I kept starting over, and that's why we've only worked on the first row so far. But I'm thinking about maybe making my own chart of bobbles, like my own pattern of bobbles. because that was also an option for the home square that I talked about last week, which was stranded color work. But since I was like new to stranded color work, I didn't really want to like deviate from the pattern too much. But with baubles, I feel like it's simple enough that I can make my own pattern. And the square itself, like the original square that Tony designed, has quite a few baubles on it, so it's a bit of a yarn eater, and I'm always like terrified that I'm gonna run out of yarn, so I might like take some of the baubles out. So more to come on that one. I'm hoping that once I get to a good point in the cardigan that I will switch back to this and just be able to like focus all of my attention on that. So hopefully in the next podcast we'll have more to say about the bauble square. So yeah, those, like I said, haven't really made too much progress on the tea cowl this week because I've been working on other things, but hopefully next week we will figure something out. You look so cute. Oh, thanks, Christina. I hope your computer issues have resolved themselves. So yeah. So bauble square is week 4, and then the 2 other squares from week 4 that I haven't even looked at yet are the meandering cable square and the full stitch square. Full stitch I've done before, so that should be easy, but meandering cables has cables in it, and you have to use like an actual cable needle, so I'm a little worried about that one. So we'll see how that goes. And then the squares for week 5 are the circle in square, the 2-tone Tunisian simple stitch square, the honeycomb square, and the tree square. And then after those 4 squares, we will be done with all 20 squares, and then we can seam them together and put the border on and everything. So I'm really excited for the tree square in particular because that one involves cross stitching, and I have been wanting to learn cross stitching for like the past couple of months or so. So I'm really excited to have like this introduction to it. So I'm really looking forward to that square in particular. So yeah, that is all that I have to say about the holiday tea cowl. Let's see, get some water. All right. And then the next project that I wanted to talk about today has been ongoing for a while, and that is my Soundwave shawl by Stephanie Aaron. So the main color is Leroo cotton, tinsel fingering, and After the Rain, and then the mohair is Sorella yarn mohair and the colorway Voyager. So the shawl doesn't look like too different from the last time I showed it. I think it was episode 4 was the last time I showed it. So if you didn't catch the Make With Me episode from a couple of weeks ago, this is what I was working on, and I was confident enough to think that I'd be able to work on mohair while trying to hold a conversation with people. So I actually messed up and had to attempt to frog the mohair, and it didn't end well. It snagged. I couldn't do it. So I had read somewhere that if you stick your whip in the freezer, a whip that has mohair in it, it makes it a little easier for the mohair, to frog the mohair rather. So I stuck it in the freezer for a good 3 or 4 hours. I'm not sure how long it was supposed to be in the freezer, but I felt like 3 or 4 hours was a good amount of time, and it didn't really help at all. So I just ended up cutting the mohair, and I think that's okay because I still have plenty left. But yeah, it was just, so if you have any good tips on how to frog mohair, I would like to know, because, and it's ironic because I had literally just been saying like not even 5 minutes before that frogging mohair was difficult, and then I ended up having to frog mohair. So I probably jinxed myself a little bit there. But yeah, I haven't really worked on this that much since then, not out of frustration. I've just been busy with some of my other projects. So I think that this mohair row that I'm in the middle of is row 27, and there are 44 rows total. So we're making some progress, but again, since it's a shawl that increases outwards, those rows are going to get longer and longer, and it's going to take, it already takes a while to get from one end to the other, so we still have a ways to go on this one, but I'm really excited to see it in its full glory. As you can see, it's already like pretty big. I can't even get the whole thing on camera really. So I'm really excited about this one for sure. So yeah, I just wanted to give an update on how the mohair frogging went or didn't go, because I didn't actually end up frogging it. I just ended up cutting it. So yeah. All right. So, I wanted to start doing kind of like some special segments on the podcast besides just talking about my whips. Obviously, like, the podcast will always be primarily centered on crochet and knitting and Tunisian crochet and whatever other crafts that I decide to pick up. But I wanted to do, from time to time, do things a little bit differently, because I do have like a life outside of crochet. Not much of a life, but I do have a life outside of crochet and other interests outside of crochet. So I wanted to give y'all a kind of like window into that side of me as well. So the first segment that I had in mind to do was a Q&A segment. So earlier this week, I put a little question box in my stories and asked for questions, and I got a lot of good ones. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to answer all of them today. If I'm not, then I will just continue on in episode 7. But if I am, then that will be great. And also feel free to ask any questions in the chat as well, because I'll be watching that. Caitlin over at Oak and Willow has some cute cross stitching patterns. Yes, I've seen her patterns for sure. I've been meaning to try out some of them. I just haven't had a chance to. But yeah, I'm curious to see how cross stitching on Tunisian crochet in particular will work out. All right, so the first question that I got was, what's your favorite platform to sell patterns on and why? So I would say that my favorite platform right now is Threadfolio. It's very new and there's still new features being added intermittently. But I do think that it's very like user-friendly and chic and simple. So if you don't know, Threadfolio was created by Shell of Chain 2 Crochet on Instagram, and she is a software engineer. So she does things like this for a living. So the platform is, I guess, more accessible than maybe some other platforms that we usually use to buy and sell crochet patterns on. I'm not going to get into that because that could be an entire episode on its own. We're keeping it positive today. We're keeping it positive. And that's the thing, you know, I think that it's more productive to, rather than complaining about something that's wrong, like actually offer some solutions. Actually, you know, try to solve the problem instead of just complaining. And so Threadfolio is an attempt to solve that problem. So yeah, you can sell not just knitting and crochet patterns on Threadfolio, but I think also macrame, and there was one other. I think it was sewing. I want to say it was sewing. So yeah, I really enjoy it. I have sold patterns on Threadfolio and I have bought a pattern on Threadfolio, and it works really well both ways. It's very user-friendly, and I think that that's the main thing. A lot of these platforms can be a little complicated, trying to figure out like what you need to click, how you need to set it up, but Threadfolio isn't really like that. It's very like simple and straightforward, and I think that a lot of people will appreciate that. So if you are a designer, definitely consider listing your patterns on Threadfolio. if you don't design and you just like buying patterns, definitely be sure to like check it out, make an account, and see what's on there, because there are already a lot of good patterns on there. I have 2 patterns on there. I have my brick house pillow on there, and then my Drea drawstring bag, and there's like so many other patterns as well. So yeah, definitely be sure to check it out, and then make sure that you follow Shell at chain2crochet. So it's like chain.2.crochet. And then there's also a separate Instagram account for Threadfolio. It's just at Threadfolio. So that you can be up to date with whatever new updates are coming along. So I would definitely say that that's my favorite platform at the moment. I also sell things on PayHip, but I haven't really been putting too much effort. I'm just going to be honest. I haven't really been putting too much effort into PayHip. So yeah, that is my favorite platform. Threadfolio is my favorite platform. All right. Next question was favorite food. So this one's hard for me. I don't think that I really have a favorite food, because I'm the type of person who gets bored eating the same thing all the time. But I will kind of answer the question and go with my favorite cuisine, and that would be Mediterranean food. I love Mediterranean food. It's so good. Falafel, hummus, give me all of it. I love it. And here in Houston, there are a lot of good Mediterranean places around, like authentic Mediterranean, not like a chain. And it's just so good. I love Mediterranean food. So I can't like narrow it down to a specific food item that's my favorite, but my favorite cuisine by far is Mediterranean food. Let's see. All right, next question. What exactly does a civil engineer do? What's it like? Okay. OMG, same. Give me all the Mediterranean food. Yes, it's so good. I love Mediterranean food. Yes, absolutely. So, all right, so what does a civil engineer do? What's it like? Okay, so I guess this is like a 2-part question. So I'll kind of talk about more what a civil engineer does broadly, and then I'll talk about what I specifically do. So civil engineers basically work on anything that has to do with infrastructure. So if you go to college and you get your bachelor's in civil engineering, you can go into a lot of different fields. You can go into structural engineering, which has to do with buildings. You can go into transportation, which has to do with roadway, and even the kind of traffic light timings. So if you've ever wondered how like they decide how long a traffic light should stay green or red or whatever, that is something that civil engineers are involved in. There are formulas that go into that. You can go into something called geotechnical engineering, which has a lot to do with the properties of soil, because if you are building a new house or something, you want to make sure that the foundation isn't going to settle, and so you need to do a study to make sure that that's not going to happen. You can go into environmental engineering, which has a lot to do with water quality and air quality and soil quality, but that kind of also gets a little bit more into like chemistry. Let's see, what else? You can go into water and wastewater treatment. I had an internship in that once. Not my cup of tea, but it's something that civil engineers do. Or you can go into stormwater engineering, which is what I do. And I'm definitely missing some, but those are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So civil engineering is a very, very broad field, and I'm definitely leaving some stuff out for sure. So what I specifically do, I work in stormwater and kind of flood control engineering, and I work on what are called hydrologic and hydraulic models, or H&H models, because that's quite a mouthful. So there's 2 parts to that, right? So hydrology has to do with what is happening to the water after it rains. So how much of the water is actually infiltrating or soaking into the ground versus how much of the water is running off across the surface. Because the runoff is what you're concerned with, because that is what is going to cause your flooding. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. One thing is the land use. So you're not going to have as much runoff coming from like a park than you would from like an apartment complex. Because I'm looking out the window of my apartment complex now and it's straight concrete, right? So you're not gonna have as much water soaking into the concrete. A lot of it's going to run off. And then another factor is the actual soil, which I kind of talked about a little earlier with like the geotech stuff. Some soils are, it's easier for the water to infiltrate. Some soils it's not. So here in Houston, a problem that we have is a lot of our soils are clay. And so clay soils have really small particles. And so it's hard for the water to like get in between the particles. And that's one of the many reasons why we have drainage issues here in Houston. So yeah, and of course, obviously, like how much it rains, the intensity of rainfall, right? So if it's just sprinkling, you're not really concerned about flooding. But if the sky opens up and it's going on like that for hours and hours, that's when you start to get concerned. So that's hydrology. How much is it raining, and where does the water go? Hydraulics kind of has more to do with the drainage systems. So this is your detention basins and your channels and your storm sewer system. So depending on how all of that is set up, that's going to affect your drainage. If we're talking about storm sewer specifically, you have to look at the size of the pipes, the shapes of the pipes, the elevations of the pipe. So is it like relatively flat, or does it have a bit of a slope to it? The material that the pipes are made out of, the length of the pipe. There are like all these factors that is your hydraulic system. So the models that I work on, like you have the hydrology and you have the hydraulics, and you put them together, and those models are supposed to reflect what's going on in real life. When it rains, where's the water going, whose house is getting flooded, and all of that good stuff. So generally what my job kind of involves is I would build one of those models to represent what's going on in we'd call it the existing condition. So if you just left the area alone, didn't do anything, didn't make any sort of improvements, this is how much flooding you're going to get. So we'd build that model so that they'd have an idea of that. And then we would start looking at, okay, what can we do to actually help this area? You know, can we put a detention basin in? Can we make this channel deeper or wider? Can we put a bigger storm sewer pipe in here? What can we do to mitigate some of this flooding? So there's like several different like types of projects. Some projects are like alternatives analysis, where it's like, okay, here are 5 different things you can do, but this is the one I recommend because it gives like the most benefit, or like it costs the least, or whatever the case may be. Each client has like their different objectives and things that are important to them. Or we might put together like a master drainage plan, which is like usually like county-wide or city-wide. Like these are like all these different improvements that you can do, and you can kind of like mix and match and see which ones are going to work better. Anyway, so the modeling is the first part of it, and then you also have to like usually like write a report to go along with it to kind of interpret the results, because it's not just enough to give them the model. You kind of have to explain what's going on, and then that usually involves making exhibits, which are kind of maps. So we'll usually have like a general overview map, and then we'll have a map showing the floodplain, so the parts of the land that are actually underwater, and then maps showing like what our proposed improvements are, and probably one that shows what the existing infrastructure is as well. So that is in a nutshell what I do on my day-to-day. And yeah, it's good. It can be like demanding at times. It seems like we're really busy right now. But it's definitely very interesting. And like I said, I live in an area that has a lot of drainage issues and floods quite a bit. So it's good to feel like I'm helping out with that a little bit. My personal contribution, like Andrea's personal contribution, is very small in the grand scheme of the entire city, but it still feels good. So yeah, that is what I do. If you asked another civil engineer what they do, you'd probably get a totally different answer. So yeah, that is what a civil engineer does and what Drea does. Alrighty. Next question is favorite type of plant. So one of the segments that I was wanting to do actually is talking about my plants. I currently have, we'll call it 7 plants. I have an 8th plant that really isn't doing well right now, but we don't have to talk about it. It's fine. But yeah, I got a bunch of plants at the beginning of this year just to kind of have like some green around. My apartment is very beige, and so I kind of wanted to bring some life into it as kind of like a self-care thing to help with my mental health. And I just love plants now. I want all the plants. Like, I want my apartment to be overrun by plants, but I've been trying to show a little bit of restraint. So in terms of my favorite plant or my favorite type of plant, it will have to be a snake plant. So I actually wanted to show y'all, this is my snake plant, and I actually name my plants. So this is Gerald. And the reason why Gerald is my favorite is because he's been one of the only plants that hasn't really given me that much trouble. You know, all of my other plants have kind of looked like they were going to die on me, and then I would have to like scramble to figure out what was wrong with them. But Gerald has been one of the only ones that's been tried and true. Gerald has never let me down. Like, he can do anything. Like, you can water it once a month, you can water it once a week, like, and he's just gonna be cool with it. Like, you can like keep him in the dark, you can put him right next to the window, like he's just chill. And he has just grown so much. So I got, man, even when I set it down, you can still see it in the frame. So I got Gerald back in January, and when I got him, he really only had like 5 leaves, and they were all maybe like the height of this one. And just like, look at how much he's grown. Like, he's just been shooting up. So I would definitely say that snake plants are my favorite type of plant. Alrighty, next question. Favorite thing to do while crocheting? So like I said, I really like watching podcasts while I crochet. And then I also like watching TV shows. So I'm like a binge watcher for sure, like 8 to 10 episodes at a time. So I like to crochet to keep my hands busy while I'm doing that. And then as far as the podcasts go, specifically like crochet and knitting podcasts, I like to hear other people talking about their projects while I'm working on my own. It just kind of feels like some sort of like exchange or community. And so that's part of the reason why I decided to start my podcast. So I hope that this can kind of serve to be the same thing for y'all as well. All right, so next question. Tell us all about the switch from patterns and resources to resources and patterns, please. Okay, so what this is referring to is, I think I mentioned this in episode 1, maybe 2. It was definitely early on. Is if you go to my Instagram bio, it says something to the effect of like resources and patterns for modern crocheters who want to improve their skills. So I was saying that up until a couple months ago, it used to say patterns and resources, but I switched the wording to kind of reflect that I wanted to focus more on resources and patterns. And it's basically just to show that the resources are kind of going to take higher priority from me than the patterns are going forward. After I created my crochet skill level quiz, I found that I really enjoyed creating the resources more so than I did designing. I will still design. I have several designs that are kind of like in progress right now, so those will all come out eventually. But I think that, you know, everybody designs, but not everybody makes resources. And so I kind of felt that that could be my contribution to the community, is creating these resources to like educate and to help you improve your skills. So that is why I switched the wording around from patterns and resources to resources and patterns. All right, next question. I love your hashtag heck yeah cheap yarn, Rex. Yeah, so I am all about heck yeah cheap yarn. I only recently started getting into like hand dyed or like more expensive yarn, so I'm definitely all for finding more inexpensive alternatives. So what I've done is I have gone through my stash, I've gone through projects that I've made, and I've identified 5 yarns that I would classify as cheap. So cheap or inexpensive will mean different things to everybody. You know, we all have different budgets and different lifestyles. So what I find inexpensive might be like super inexpensive to you, or like too, you know, we all have like different definitions of that. So I have these 5 yarns here with me. I've given you the price, the grams, and the yards, and then I've broken it down to cost per yard so that you can make your own decisions. So the first yarn I'll talk about, which you've been hearing a lot about lately, it's what I'm using for the holiday tea cow, is Knit Picks or We Crochet Brava Worsted. It's a size 4 yarn, 100% acrylic. So 1 skein of this yarn is $2, and by the way, this will be in US dollars, since that is where I'm located. So 1 skein of this yarn is $2.49. It's 100 grams and 218 yards. So that breaks down to 1.1 cent per yard. So yeah, I would definitely say this is a pretty inexpensive yarn. I really like it. I think it's going to be my like go-to acrylic yarn that I use for blankets because I really enjoy making blankets. It's super soft, it comes in a ton of colors. So yeah, I really like Brava Worsted, and it is the, if you're looking at the cost per yard, it is the most inexpensive yarn that I have on here. Next yarn is Paintbox Simply Aran. It is $3 per skein, 100 grams, and 201 yards. So that breaks down to 1.5 cents per yarn. So this is another really good acrylic yarn. I don't like it quite as much as I like the Brava Worsted, but it's available on Lovecrafts, and it's very soft, comes in a good amount of colors, and I have it because I was originally making a shawl out of this, but then I decided it would be a little bit too heavy, so I frogged it, but I think some of this is going to be used in my traveling knit afghan that I'm working on. And yeah, it's really soft. This is a really good color, nice and vibrant. So yeah, I think this is definitely a good value. Just ordered some of the Brava Worsted yarn. Thanks for sharing about it. Yay, yeah, you'll have to let me know how you like it. I love it. I will like use Brava Worsted for like the rest of my life probably. So I hope that you like it as much as I do. All right, next yarn. And I unfortunately don't know where the label for this one is, but this is the Knit Picks or We Crochet. Are y'all noticing a trend here? There are certain brands that I just love. Knit Picks is one of them, but this is the Dishy yarn. This is their size 4 cotton yarn. It is $2.99 per skein, 100 gram skeins, and 190 yards in those skeins. So that breaks down to 1.6 cents per yard. So yeah, I really, really like Dishy. It's definitely, so when you talk about cotton yarns, you know, there are kind of like two camps or like two categories of cotton yarns, right? So there are your like really like soft, drapey cotton yarns that you're going to want to use for like your garments. And then there are like the workhorse cotton yarns that you're going to use for your washcloths and dishcloths and like more of like your home decor kind type stuff. So I would definitely classify Dishy as more of a workhorse yarn. You know, it has a little bit of grit to it. I would say it's not quite as like stiff or hard as Lily Sugar and Cream. Lily Sugar and Cream like actually hurts my hands. Dishy does not hurt my hands, but it does kind of, it's not like super soft, but I think you could get away with using it for a garment or something like that if you really wanted to. But yeah, I actually had a design planned with Dishy. You know, due to like COVID and everything, it's been kind of hard to keep yarns in stock. And so I decided to move forward on the design with a different yarn, which I'll actually talk about in a little bit. But yeah, I really like Dishy. So if you're someone who makes a lot of like washcloths and dishcloths and things like that around the home that require cotton yarn, I would definitely recommend Dishy. And it's relatively inexpensive. Also, if you are someone who likes I Love This Cotton from Hobby Lobby, I'm not going to say that this is a dupe for that yarn, but I think it's a good alternative. It's not quite as soft as I Love This Cotton, but if you are trying to look for some alternatives to shopping there, I would recommend this yarn as a good starting point. Next yarn is Lion Brand Kobu. So I'm using this for my lattice lace dress, which I haven't talked about in a while because I haven't worked on it in a while, but we don't have to talk about that. But Lion Brand Kobu is a 50-50 cotton bamboo blend, and it is a DK weight or like a size 3. So it's very soft. It has good stitch definition. My only critique is that it does kind of split a little bit as you're working it up, but as you kind of like go on, you get used to it and it doesn't split as much. So that's my only critique of the yarn. But it's really nice if you live in a warmer climate like I do. It'll be good for your garments. I think it's nice and breathable. And yeah, it comes in like a decent variety of colors. So this is $5.99 per skein. It's 100 grams and 232 yards. So this is 2.6 cents per yard. So a little bit more expensive than the ones that I just mentioned, but it's definitely going to be a little bit more cost effective than something that's like indie dyed or something like that. So Lion Brand Kobu, definitely a good DK weight for garments. And then my last recommendation for now is, and I don't really hear people talking about this one in the States that much. I think it's more of a bigger deal in Europe, but this is Rico Design Creative Cotton Aran. Is it Aran or Aran? I never know. But yeah, this is a size 4 cotton. Honestly, it's definitely a lighter size 4. I feel like you could get away with calling this a size 3. It's a very light worsted for sure. So this is $2.89 per skein, 50 gram skein, and 90 yards. So that breaks down to 3.2 cents per yard. So this is actually the yarn that I'm using for my geometric etc. pattern that will come out at some point in the future. Not entirely sure when, but it's gonna come out eventually. So yeah, this is the yarn that I used to replace the Dishy yarn since I ran out. That's what I was talking about earlier. Because it had their cream kind of match the Dishy cream. So anyway, that's a long story. But yeah, I really recommend this yarn. It's nice and soft. Even though I am using it for more of like a workhorse home decor type thing, I definitely do think it's soft enough to make garments with. So yeah, I think this would be a good option if you're ever making anything larger. So yeah, those are my 5 recommendations for now of some budget-friendly yarns. I would like to, like, you know, write a blog post or make a video or something all about like inexpensive yarn recommendations, because I do feel like it's really important. I have some other recommendations, but since time and everything, I wanted to only stick with the 5. So yeah, I think I will go ahead and like make a resource or a video or something with yarn recommendations, because I like talking about yarn and people like to hear about yarn. So yeah. Alrighty, so it is 1:50. Let's see. That's kind of a long-winded answer. So I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up here. Thank y'all so much for joining me. If you were able to join me live, I had so much fun as always. I'm glad that everybody enjoyed my costume. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, if you missed at the beginning, I am going to be having a little bit of a schedule change. So we will still have episode 7 next Saturday on November 7th, 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. But episode 8 isn't going to be until 2 Saturdays after that. And so on November 14th, we will have Make With Me episode 2. So definitely make sure you're watching my Instagram to stay updated about that. If you've stumbled upon this on YouTube, my Instagram is at DREA'S_hook. That's DREAS_HOOK. So definitely be sure to follow me and watch my stories to stay updated about any future schedule changes. So yeah, if you enjoyed this podcast and you're on IGTV, it would be very helpful for me to like the video, comment on the video, and share it to your stories. And if you're on YouTube, it would be helpful for you to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel especially. It shows YouTube that my content is interesting and helps spread the fiber arts love. So once again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a good rest of your day, a good rest of your week, and I will talk to y'all next week. Happy making. Bye.